Next week is Earth Week, a week designed to help shed light on environmental issues leading into Earth Day, Friday, April 22nd. One of the most impactful things individuals can do is recycle. We'll learn more about local recycling efforts. That's coming up next on WNIN Newsmakers. Reduce, reuse, recycle. It's been the mantra of environmentalists for decades. So how does our area stack up with recycling efforts? A look at local recycling efforts wouldn't be complete without a visit to Tri-State Resource Recovery Facility in Evansville.
This facility's been here since 1994, which was the origin of recycling in Evansville. At that point, it was a curb sort program, so all of the items that were set out at the curb were sorted by the driver and delivered segregated from other commodities. So it was strictly just a baling operation at that point. We're a 5-day-a-week operation, essentially from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4:30 or so in the afternoon. We also service the city of Henderson, the town of Newburgh, any other solid waste districts in surrounding counties, as well as then commercial businesses within that same geography. This is a 501c3, not-for-profit. It's been that way since our existence in 1994, and then when we bought the facility in 1997. And what we try to do is a variety of different missions and goals, but the primary one being hiring of unemployed enterprise zone residents, trying to provide them with some job skills. In 2013, we moved to the single stream project, which provided the 96-gallon containers at the curbs of those that want to participate. Currently have about a 60-65% participation rate among residents in the city of Evansville, and all materials are then commingled in that 96-gallon container and brought here to be sorted. It is going to come from any residential household in the city of Evansville. It could come from county subscription recycling programs. It could come from various drop-off programs throughout the county, throughout surrounding counties. In your residential stream, you can have any of your 1 through 7 plastics, aluminum cans, steel food cans, any fiber source being paper products, can be your empty macaroni and cheese boxes, your cereal boxes, junk mail, homework, all of those things, your Amazon packages, all of those can be put into your container as well. Glass has been a difficult one going back to the origin of 1994. In 94, when it was source separated, it made for a much cleaner product, more desirable by the end markets. In 2013, when we went single stream and you mixed all the colors together with all of the other commodities in there, made it a much more difficult process to find end markets that were tolerable of some of those things that shouldn't be in there. We prefer at this point that it not be in there. Our hope is that in the future that there'll be separate programs that identify glass and maybe separate collection sites so that we can keep that out of the single stream and a more desirable product then for the end markets. The commercial side of our business is actually our largest portion of our business. We'll do somewhere in the 2,400 ton range per month of commercial source segregated material, cardboards being the bulk of that, cardboard material. We also do shredded programs, shredded office paper programs, confidential document destruction type programs, any of those that fit into the commercial market. We have a pretty elaborate sorting system, and for a market of the size of Evansville, we're really fortunate to have this type of investment and this type of recycling available to us. It's a multifaceted approach, right? As we walked through there, you saw where we're getting contaminants out of the stream. We have an automated process that takes the corrugated out of the stream. We have an automated process that takes out the glass from the stream, automation that'll handle the steel food containers, automation for the aluminum beverage containers, And our prize system is our robot that we recently installed last May for a variety of different plastic products that is getting taken out of the stream as well. You know, we get a lot of different things in here. However, with that said, I'll tell you that our contamination rate is around 13 to 15% of the overall stream coming in here. On a national basis, that's a low average. So the citizens are doing a great job keeping that clean, but obviously our goal is to get it as close to zero as possible. Get all kinds of odd things in here that shouldn't be in here that, yeah, it degrades the quality of the material we're trying to sort, causes equipment issues, causes all types of problems, safety problems, depending on what the commodity or the product might be. We prefer it to be as clean as possible. As you can imagine, in summer months when things are 100 degrees out here and you have old rotting food in containers, it causes rodent problems, it causes health issues beyond just the odor of the facility. So the cleaner it can be, the nicer it is for our facility, for our employees, but it's also a quality aspect of the material that we're trying to produce. So Alcoa being a big buyer of aluminum, for instance, so it's going to go back to a smelter plant and turn back into aluminum cans. Fiber and cardboard being the bulk of our material, it's either going mixed paper, going to a mill in Wabash, Indiana. Corrugated, going over to Henderson to International Paper or other corrugated buyers to be turned back into corrugated boxes and paper type products. Recycling is important because it's going to help our landfill space is probably the number one goal. You know, we're becoming more and more restricted on the size and the space available for residuals, and so, you know, anytime that we can close the loop and recycle, the better we're going to be as a society in helping the overall environment.
If you can't get curbside recycling services where you live, here are some recycling events that are coming up in Vanderburgh County. Toxaway Day is Saturday, April 16th in the Civic Center parking lot. And Electronics Recycling Day is Saturday, April 30th, also in the Civic Center parking lot. Other regularly open recycling centers in our area are Ohio Township Recycling, 3600 Casey Road in Newburgh, and Posey County has 5 recycling centers. And the Henderson County Recycling Center. Now we're joined by Rob Flores, Vice President of Sustainability at Berry Global. Thanks so much for joining us, Rob.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us, Berry has started kind of evolving over the years to put more of a focus on recycling and recycled plastics. So walk us through that process. What was the thought process, and about how much of your plastics that you're producing now are post-recycled content?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we recognize at Berry that there is a plastic waste issue, right? You know, we've seen it on the pictures on social media and in the news, and we want to do something about it. We want to be proactive and, you know, address the issue, and we believe that some of the most critical things we can do are designing for recycling and using recycled content. You know, when we design for recycling, we ensure that our products can have a second and third and fourth life, and when we use recycled content, we actually fulfill that promise of recyclable and do give them the second and third life. So we're trying to really create a circular economy around plastics.
Well, and if I remember correctly, you've become part of a greater collaboration that has really put more of a focus on recycling from the plastics manufacturers, correct? Trying to keep plastics out of the oceans and out of the landfills. Tell us a little bit about this larger organization or this larger collaborative.
Yes, Berry actually has multiple, we have many partnerships around the world. Some of the ones are with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We have committed to 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging by 2025, as well as for it to have an average of 10% recycled content. And when you say, you know, 10%, maybe that's not the biggest number, but if you look at plastics, you know, it's a relatively new industry, and recycling, I would say, is still in its infancy for plastics. And one of the most critical things for us is food safety. You know, when you drink out of a plastic water bottle or, you know, a polypropylene drink cup, you want to know that it's safe when it's touching your food. And so as we build the recycling system up for plastics, that's really one of our first issues, is ensuring that food safety. And that's really been a limitation in the past. And we're working with our suppliers and across the industry to really address that, so that we can give customers the products that they want and that also feel safe and are better for the environment.
So walk us through the decision making about going to post-consumer recycled content. I know that we've talked about contaminants off camera. Tell us a little bit about how you make that decision and why sometimes it's difficult to use post-consumer recycled plastics rather than raw materials.
I'm really glad you asked, because before it probably wasn't enough of the conversation. And then now, with all the attention about it, it's less of a decision and more of something we're just proactively pushing with our customers. And we work very closely with our customers, the major brand owners like, say, P&G, Unilever, et cetera. We work very closely with them, and so we're doing the upfront testing to validate how much recycled content we can add, and then working closely with them to actually then commercialize those. But as we talked about with recycling kind of being in its infancy, so to speak, there's some streams that are very mature and some streams that do have food safety. And there's other, say, newer streams like polypropylene that it's just we're building it as we go along, and it takes a little bit of time. But yeah, as you said, contamination. Obviously, we're making a lot of food packaging, a lot of other regulated items, medical items, et cetera. So quality and food safety are probably some of our utmost concerns. And then once we find materials that work for an application, then it becomes a pricing concern.
Okay. Well, you mentioned polypropylene. There's a special story about your shirt. So tell us a little bit about your shirt and why the focus on polypropylene.
Yeah, so we use a lot of different plastics, but here in Evansville, the number one plastic we use is number 5, polypropylene. And we make a lot of polypropylene drink cups locally, as well as polypropylene containers. And we wanted to make sure that those could be recycled locally. If we're producing them locally, we want to make sure they can be recycled locally. And we partnered with Tri-State Resource Recovery, the local recycling center, and the state of Indiana through IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management, to actually invest in sorting technology in our local recycling center to make sure that they could sort and recycle polypropylene.
Terrific. Well, you brought up a good point. Some people maybe think that it's Barry's decision to use or not use post-recycled content, but really you're the packager. Your customer is actually helping drive or driving those packaging decisions, correct? So how do you work with them, as you mentioned, to try to move them toward this product? And is it mainly a price concern that then they have to pass on to the consumer?
As I said, we are working very closely with them. A lot of our customers have made similar commitments to us. And so we know that they're well aligned, and we're partnering with those customers and bringing them solutions that help them achieve their goals. So it's just a very exciting time to be in the plastic packaging industry as we solve these problems and drive towards circularity.
So as you're making the plastics and you're making the containers and bottles and things like that, do you internally recycle the scrap and the other things, the materials that's left over? Tell us about that process.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes. We do a lot of internal recycling of our scrap, and I would honestly, the numbers aren't very public, but I would estimate we're one of the largest plastic recyclers in the world. Amazing. Based on the recovery of our internal scrap.
So explain to us the difference between post-consumer recycling and then what might be called post-manufacturer recycling or post-industrial recycling, just to make it clear in everyone's mind.
Yeah, so post-consumer plastics or packaging, anything post-consumer, a consumer had that product and it was used for its intended purpose. So businesses can be consumers as well with, say, stretch wrap, but really it means it's served its purpose and now gone in the recycling stream, whereas post-industrial, that's more of our scrap. So, we have edge trim, I won't bore you with the details, but the post-industrial has not served its purpose yet. It hasn't left and gone to a consumer, so it's the industrial scrap.
So when we talk about recycling, how much of the onus is, again, on us as consumers in terms of reducing contamination, making sure that plastic is clean or able to be recycled? What would you want the audience to know about their role in recycling as well?
Yeah, the consumers have a very large part to play. I don't want to put all the pressure on them because some of the pressure is on us too, to design for recycling And then municipalities also have to make it easy for the consumers to know what to recycle and how to recycle. But the consumer is obviously where the rubber hits the road. As we think about the residents here in town, it's them that decides whether or not to put it in the recycling bin, and that's really just the beginning of the journey. And there's many decisions that we make that affect, the processing and the ability of it to be sorted, but it all starts its journey when the consumer says, does this go into the bin or not?
Mm-hmm. And so are there different types of sizing? We talk about recycling. The coffee pods used to be too small to get through those recycling sorters and things like that. But now, if I remember correctly, Barry has gone to recyclable plastic in some of the coffee pods. And are you seeing more people that are using like Keurig pods and things like that starting to recycle and to be able to do that?
Yes, definitely. There are limitations that we're trying to overcome. In the case of the coffee pod specifically, that's an interesting example because they used to be in number 6, polystyrene, which I'll just say is not recycled locally. And most of them have converted over to number 5, polypropylene, that does have strong recycling markets. With the coffee pods specifically, they really do prefer for the coffee grounds to be emptied out, but it is made out of a recyclable plastic, and then just depending on the community, those can be accepted for recycling.
So you're a global company and a large manufacturer of plastics. Give us the sight line out into the future. Where do you see recycling going for both you as a large manufacturer and also for consumers?
Oh, I think globally, everyone's just really increased awareness around plastic, and it's really driving recycling and awareness, and I think it's going to be a major part of our future. We have the goal of 10% recycled content in our packaging by 2025, and we've already committed that by 2030, we'll have 30% circular plastics, which includes both recycled and renewable. Because I don't know if you know this, but we can actually make plastics from renewable resources like corn and sugarcane.
Great, so it doesn't have to be previous plastic. You're looking for other sources to make that plastic from.
I can confidently say that we are actively working to decouple from virgin fossil fuels.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob Flores from Berry Global. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now let's look at some post-consumer recycled products. Joining us is Brent Grafton, president of Green Tree Plastics. Green Tree Plastics makes a variety of products from post-consumer and post-manufacturer plastic lumber. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, we appreciate you having us.
So tell us, why did you start this company? Walk us through that process.
So actually it was because I had nothing to do. So I was looking around in Evansville trying to figure out what untapped resource our community had that could be made into a business. And I discovered that we have massive piles of plastics. I don't know how many of your viewers know we are plastics capital of the Midwest, possibly of the country. And so that sounded, okay, now what can I do with that? And I went out looking for something to do and ended up buying a plastic lumber company out of Kansas. When we first considered going into business, I was doing a lot of reading business, and they made comments that, you have to reinvent yourself every 3 to 5 years. Well, I can say today that that's true. So we've been in business almost 20 years, and our focus has changed significantly, probably 4 times.
So you take the plastics that were, as you mentioned, in the piles and actually make those into the lumber products?
So we have a full range of plastic lumber products. That's a relatively new project starting in the mid-90s. And then we have a lot of custom parts that we make, we mold. So when we brought this to Evansville, I thought we were going to get a lot of help from the local plastics guys. Well, none of them said we could do it. And had I not gone to Purdue and studied philosophy, I would have known I couldn't do it. So, so they say you can't do it. So when you injection mold a 94-pound part out of recycled plastic, and particularly has a rough surface, these guys it makes their skin crawl because they want everything to be perfect,
right.
perfect, that kind of thing. And so we actually have had an incredible amount of help. Berry Plastics early in the game called us and said, we have a problem. This is 20 years ago. We're putting our plastic in the dumpster, and once a week dumps are fire. So can you help us with it? And so we ended up did that. And that's actually how we learned how to make products out of caps.
So we mentioned the piles, but where do you get your plastics from that you then make into all your different products?
So the most recent reinvention of Green Tree Plastics occurred actually it started not far north of here. I was sitting at a table at Keep Evansville Beautiful with Ann Innes and Mary Ann. Yeah, she was a biology professor at Memorial. Okay. I don't think Watson, Mary Ann Watson. And I was sitting there and I said, you know, somebody ought to do with these what Qantas does with the little pull tabs. And Mary Ann said, well, I've got a class at school. Why don't we'll collect a bunch of caps and why don't you make a bench out of them for us? And then that started, and one of the younger siblings from that crowd that did that went to Holy Name down in Henderson. And they had a competitive project, social community problem solving project they were involved with. And so they came and asked us if they could make the bench. So those girls actually spent a year, designed the project. They're the ones that gave it its name. They figured out how many caps you can collect, how difficult it was, how it would be done. Wow. Yeah. And they actually won second place in Kentucky. And then they went to the international. I mean, as it turns out, some of the greatest contributions we seem to be making is not that we're taking plastic from the landfill, but that we're encouraging young people to be aware of the plastic that's going to the landfill. And so these girls we should have known. We went into their classroom down at Holy Name. They had 9 recycle bins in each classroom. They were very intense about it. And this, by word of mouth, as we've now had over 7,000 groups in 44 states do this project. Wow. We figure we've had millions of kids. And in my way of thinking, every time you do this, that's a point of education. So we had kids and their adults do this 60 million times last year. Wow. And that's how culture changes. They can get their whole community involved, get everybody collecting, so we're talking to each other. Then they have to come up with an adult, and then they have to raise the money. We actually had a group come in yesterday, a Kiwanis club from Redondo Beach, California. 2 ladies drove the U-Haul truck in. Wow. Bringing in their caps, picking up 17 benches to take them back to schools in the Redondo Beach area.
Was that the ABC program then?
That is what we call a bench. Yeah, and like I said, the girls from Holy Name named that. They said a bench for caps. And we've tried to stay true to their program as best as we can.
About how many caps do they have to collect in order to make a bench?
So the bench weighs about 185 pounds. So we ask that they bring 200 pounds of caps, and that's about 18,000 caps. Okay. So that's a lot of points of education.
Oh, most definitely. And so tell me a little bit about the book that you brought today that talks about or refers to one of the students, actually.
Yeah, so what happened here is that we had a young lady that was new in her school in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and she had, at 8 years old, this has been about 4 years ago she did this, she decided that she had gone to a church camp and learned about Buddy Bench, and she wanted that for her school. Well, she was new. And so the book tells a story of how her mom found us, and then she had to get the community involved. They ended up getting 3 benches.
Wow, wonderful.
And the national news picked up on her and has made her quite a celebrity. And yeah. Recently had a podcast with our lieutenant governor, and she's received all kinds of awards. And
as our audience watches and they get inspired by all of this and what they can do and how they can help their community and the world become a little more green, is there a way that they can get a hold of you? And are you seeking more students and schools that are looking to do projects like this?
Just about every school in Evansville has done this project. Lots of people are aware of it. We learned many years ago when we were dealing with big manufacturers that it's okay for me to take your plastic, but I have to sell what I take from you. And so one of the reasons this has worked so well for us is that the group will bring us 200 pounds of cap and take out a 200-pound bench. Mm-hmm. So we're processing their caps into, the people came before, but we're processing caps into their bench. Sure. So we do not accept just general donations from the public. We encourage people to get together with a scout group, your church. We have an old folks home in northern Indiana that is giving benches to all of their community. Wonderful. And so we encourage people to organize, because a lot of we have a culture that is influenced by abundance of resources. Our resources are not as abundant as we think they are. That's polyethylene, that melts at 280 degrees. This is PET. It melts at 530 degrees. But when I take that label off, there's sticky on here.
Oh, right.
And so one of our kids someday, I'm dreaming, is going to come along and say, well, if you'll just stick this to this instead of to that, that saves 6 cents a pound on the recycling of this and makes it more recycling.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that as we raise the awareness of the resources, because why do I want to recycle plastic? Well, it's a resource. I mean, I don't have to go and drill a hole in the ground and pull the oil out, take it to a refinery, put a massive, big, huge machine, then have somebody polymerize it and send it to me. I can just go out and pick it up off the ground.
Right.
And I'm doing a great favor. As it turns out, most of the plastic that's in the ocean is coming from off of watershed. So these float. So when you're doing this and you throw it out on the ground, next time it rains, it goes out into the river, down to the ocean.
Right.
And so it's it's a conscientious.
Yeah, it's a choice, right?
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
And
right.
the kids get it.
Yep.
And that's what's made it so much fun of late, is because we get stories. And then we've had a lot of groups who've done memorial benches. And we had one batch of 10 benches that was being sent out, and on top of, so there's 10 boards, names of the 10 people that had been killed in a school shooting. There wasn't a dry eye in my plant when that left.
Yeah.
I mean, the impact was just remarkable.
Hard work there.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Brent. Thank you for all of your information, and best of luck with all of the great work you're doing.
Thank you. I
We
appreciate
appreciate you.
Okay.
Thanks to all of our guests this week. We'll be taking a week off next week for the WNIN auction, which airs 7 to 10 p.m. April 21st through April 24th. Our next program will take a look at the state of our schools. Thanks for joining us for WNIN Newsmakers.